Welcome back to the Health Revival Show. We are answering a question today that I get often because Liz and I both talk a lot around electrolytes. I use a lot of electrolytes. I've gone through phases of using different balances of electrolytes. And it's very person dependent. And so we kind of want to talk about big groupings today of like what to look for, when to use what. Electrolytes are necessary for hydration. You cannot hydrate without them. You cannot hydrate with just water. And if you have certain conditions or certain situations, you're going to want to be looking at specific ratios of electrolytes. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'll let you kind of kick it off with the main ones we're going to be talking about, the sodium to potassium ratio. But electrolytes include things like magnesium and calcium and chloride. Obviously sodium, potassium. So they are the spark plugs to the body.
They are. Yeah. Think of these as like electric charges that are responsible for nerve functioning, cell signaling, blood pressure, right? So it's going to probably be a little eye-opening for you when we go through the blood pressure. If you got low blood pressure, worse than high blood pressure actually in some cases, and then what to do with that. But a lot of this also comes down to just you being properly hydrated. So I think it's really important to understand that feeling like you have this layer of puff that you are just kind of like, some of our gals will tell us it's like my fat suit. You're really puffy, you feel inflamed. A lot of this is an electrolyte imbalance and we need minerals. And so one of the things that we've done recently is we've partnered with Buoy, and they are a trace mineral and electrolyte drops, but they aren't going to be like super, super high in your sodium and potassium. There's 87 different trace minerals. So I personally use it as my trace mineral support, and then I'll add my sodium if I need more. Obviously, I always talk about my lemon water and sometimes coconut water, adding that in for more potassium or taking potassium capsules, and then my sea salt. And I'm using Salt Verk. A lot of people have messaged me recently freaking out about the latest lawsuit. It's like everybody, I just say another one bites the dust. But Salt Verk, VERK, has been ranked pretty well. Or Buoy also just has like a 2 times like hydration, like little jar that you can get for mineral salt if you want to use that as well. But this is really important to think about the ratios, and that's what we want to break down for you today. So when we're looking at the ratios, first and foremost, we're going to think about like a 1-to-1 sodium to potassium ratio if you are just starting out with electrolyte balancing. If you maybe have an HTMA test or you have blood work that shows you need something different, then that can indicate what we'll talk about with using a higher 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 sodium to potassium or even higher potassium to sodium ratio. This is also something that until I know if my client's like more sensitive, I'm going to start them out using that 1-to-1 ratio. And then I might deviate from there. If you are doing fasting, I think this is really, really important, or you're starting a detox, you need sodium on board. We need to pull this water intracellularly, help flush those cells out, help support the body detoxing here. And then again, if you are just somebody who's like general maintenance, you aren't, have experiencing any major symptoms, your blood pressure is normal, you're not experiencing any blood sugar issues. All right, cool. A 1-to-1 ratio is a pretty good spot. But when we think about needing more sodium to potassium, there's a few situations here. Number one is that you are low blood pressure. So you're feeling this like dizziness or faint. Think classic, what we would call adrenal dysfunction or adrenal burnout. I'm tired all the time. I just don't feel great. Maybe you're even hypoglycemic and running on the low blood sugar side. You experience a lot of salt cravings, okay? Salt cravings can tell us a lot about what your body is needing. If you are somebody who sweats a lot, so maybe you train intensely or you go to the sauna a lot of times, we want to remineralize the body. We need that salt, again, to shuttle into the cells. If you are detoxing or dumping a lot of toxins, we generally want a higher sodium to potassium ratio. And then one of the things that I want to expand on a little bit more here, and then I'm going to hand it over to Becca to talk about potassium, is histamines and mast cell issues. So we actually want to favor sodium to calm down mast cells and improve electrolyte function. And sodium helps because of multiple things. Number one, our adrenal function. So this helps regulate inflammation and histamine. It helps hold on to other minerals because it's a carrier here. So again, thinking about magnesium, zinc, potassium, all of those things can calm down histamine. It supports hydration again at the cellular level. If you are a dry, dehydrated raisin, you are going to experience more histamine issues. And when we say histamine issues, we're thinking about people who have itchy skin, rashes, hives, post-meal fatigue or anxiety, mystery bloating, can't figure out what's triggering you. Maybe you have headaches, you have runny nose, congestion, chronic sinus issues, overall itching, insomnia, waking up at 2 to 4 a.m. Okay, so this is where the body is experiencing a histamine storm, and we need DIO enzymes to break this down, but we also need electrolytes. So when we think about someone who is dealing with histamine reactions, we also think that they're probably dealing with a lot of other gut imbalances, the SIBO here, parasites, candida specifically. You can just be overwhelmed and experiencing a bucket that's overflowing with toxins that are inside your body and bacteria, but also the continuous exposure from the external toxins. And you don't have the right nutrients or minerals and vitamins to break this down. So we want to calm the nervous system. We want to stabilize those mast cells, and we want to support that hydration and mineral balance. Of course, for the histamine bucket, there's many other things we think about in terms of liver and detox. We think about many other peptides that can support. We've talked about this in a recent podcast, but KPV would be one that I would be utilizing. Obviously, you want to do stool testing. You want to get to the root cause. And so that's what we do in our practice, is not just look at like blood work and some of the symptoms, but we really want to understand the whole picture for the person. So link is in the show notes if you ever want to do a comprehensive lab work and review, or you're like, you know what? I've listened to you, Liz and Becca, for a long time, and you speak to my soul, and everything that you're talking about just sounds like me, and I'm tired of trying to DIY, then schedule a call. A root cause analysis is absolutely free. You spend 30 minutes with our team talking about you, what's going on, your health history. We get many, many clients from other functional doctors, practitioners, programs, and all I can say to you is I'm sorry if you have not been working with somebody who's helped you get out of this place of dysfunction. We see it all the time. People are coming in on a laundry list of supplement supports, but guess what they're missing? Air quality, water quality, and minerals. And I just don't understand, because electrolytes, these are powerhouse supports that we need, and it plays a big role, as I mentioned many times already, in terms of detoxifying things from the body. So click the link in the show notes if you're ready to get started.
Yeah. So one last thing about sodium, because I went through a really long period of time. My blood pressure was super low, and it's a really common sign of adrenal fatigue, because your body basically is like slowing down function of the system to conserve energy. And so we'll see low blood pressure. And I always thought it was like, I was so healthy. My blood pressure was like 100 over 58. And it's like, no, you're near death. Like your body is not functioning properly. And so the problem is when you have really low cortisol levels, like that stage 4 adrenal fatigue, where your body's no longer producing high levels, it's really low, you need cortisol to retain sodium. And so when you don't have cortisol, you need more sodium because your body's not retaining it. And so Liz was mentioning that adrenal fatigue, that's kind of like the mechanism behind it, is you aren't retaining any. And so your body will need a lot more of it to help retain hydration. And then if you're sweating a lot, like if you're losing water really in high amounts, if you're outside, it's really hot, you're playing sports, that's where obviously you would want additional sodium comparatively to potassium. I mean, you want probably a 2-to-1 sodium to potassium because you need to retain the water, but then potassium helps with nerve function and muscle recovery, which is why cramps, they always talk about eat a banana with cramps, or you could just take more potassium. So the sodium is huge. Low blood pressure, adrenal fatigue, the histamine issues, all of those is when you're going to want more sodium. Now, the opposite with potassium is if you are dealing with high blood pressure, which is not a sodium problem. High blood pressure is an inflammation problem. It's a problem that's usually driven by insulin resistance that then leads to inflammation, which leads to constriction on the blood vessel walls because of that inflammation. And the problem is that sodium causes you to retain more water. And so in those cases, you don't want more water because it will cause more pressure. And that's why they tell you to not take in as much sodium. No, fix the insulin resistance, fix the inflammation. That's your problem. It's not the sodium. So in these cases, though, until you fix that, you want to be tipping the scale to more potassium to sodium. So this is where you want like a 2-to-1 potassium to sodium, or sometimes even a 3-to-1 potassium to sodium ratio, because potassium relaxes blood vessel walls. And it can help obviously improve the blood pressure that's going on. So some other things that you kind of understand with potassium is that potassium, like I mentioned, helps with essentially enabling muscles to contract properly. And it helps transmit nerve signals. So it helps a lot with muscle recovery. So if you are someone that deals with a lot of muscle cramps or spasms, sometimes that's an indication that you need more potassium to help with that. It helps with blood pressure, like I mentioned, kidney function. So potassium can help prevent kidney stones, and it supports overall kidney health. It helps with bone health. So potassium particularly helps reduce calcium that's excreted through the urine. So people that have really, really imbalanced electrolyte statuses might have like low calcium or osteopenia development. That usually is a sign that you need better electrolyte status and balance of all of them. Same thing with magnesium. Low magnesium can cause calcium loss. And then stroke prevention, and that's another one that has to do with blood pressure balance. So the one thing to understand here too is that a lot of people are like, well, my electrolytes looked fine on my serum levels, right? I got a CMP panel, all of my electrolytes were fine. Serum levels of electrolytes are like end stage. Your body will do everything possible to maintain proper blood levels of electrolytes. You're not going to see the beginning imbalances. That is going to be more intracellular. And so you will not be able to see that on a lab panel, like a blood panel. That's why we use a lot more of symptoms and what people are dealing with otherwise. Like, for example, like Liz was saying, that adrenal fatigue, the histamine issues, those are showing signs of need for higher sodium. The blood pressure, but also people that retain water. We've actually been doing this with me recently. I tend to store water very easily due to some inflammatory predispositions, due to what I believe is going to be showing on my genetics, the new one, my mitochondrial issues. And so we've been upping potassium. Also, if you have a genetics test and you have the ACE gene, there's a block with the ACE gene, which is a predisposition to hypertension. That usually is also a sign that you need more potassium to sodium. So some companies that have that, Just Ingredients has a really great, we have a code FitMom, if you want to use code FitMom for that. Just Ingredients has a 2-to-1 potassium to sodium ratio. And then Instant Hydration, I know, is another company that has a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, I believe. You can also just take potassium capsules or potassium powder because it can be hard. Most things that you eat are going to have more sodium. So like and most people salt their food, right? You don't potassium your food. So like you're probably going to need to be more intentional if you need a higher potassium to sodium ratio, just because of your general daily consumption of food is going to tip you more in the scale of sodium. And you need salt. Like, do not eliminate salt. You will not survive. Every human living organism needs salt to survive. It is necessary. You would die without sodium. So if you need to tip the scale in terms of the potassium ratio, you're probably just going to have to be more intentional with like taking additional potassium via capsules, different electrolyte balances, or a powder.
Yeah, I think the Keto 1000 powder is just straight potassium, right?
Yep, and another reason, if you're following keto, carbohydrates help you retain water. And so if you're really low carbohydrate, that's why Liz was mentioning with fasting, you need a little bit more sodium because you're just going to lose water. And so sodium helps you maintain a proper fluid balance of that, but you also tend to lose the balance of sodium potassium. So that's why I like the Keto 1000 because it helps keep the potassium without blowing up, because that's where it's what ultimately happens when people are like really sick and have that improper, you swell. So like that's, if anyone's ever outside in the summertime and you're like, my rings, I can't, but I haven't drank a lot of water. So like what's happening, I'm dehydrated, but I'm swollen. That's what happens with the body, is you'll start to see swelling happen because the body's trying to retain that balance and it's struggling because you're dehydrated. Happens with keto because carbohydrates help you retain that water.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just to touch on here, I think you might have mentioned this, but I'm going to reiterate it if you did, how potassium can help lower your blood pressure. So we see this in terms of relaxing the blood vessels, which can reduce the tension, like Becca was saying. But a big thing here is also your sodium potassium pumps. So every cell in the body has a sodium potassium pump. And so potassium removes excess sodium from cells by activating a pump that transport the sodium out and potassium in, which can improve that blood pressure. Mm-hmm. Once you get that re-regulated, hopefully we can then go back to more of that even 1-to-1 ratio, but you might want to pull potassium higher. Another little clinical pearl here is if you're somebody who's constipated and you're taking magnesium and it's not doing the trick for you, you likely need to add more potassium, or you need to come up to like a 2-to-1 potassium to sodium ratio. I have seen this work really well. There is an electrolyte company I know that has a little bit higher potassium. I believe it's Fringe, that you could also look into. Otherwise, what I generally do, because I love my Element. I love my buoy. I just add more potassium in the capsule form because it's really cheap if I, need to do that. With somebody, that's also easy because you can find potassium capsules at like a Whole Foods or whatever. So if you're constipated, you might want to try increasing that potassium, but you need magnesium. That's a really, really important piece here. I think that a lot of people don't necessarily realize that potassium and magnesium also work synergistically together because they always think of it in terms of sodium.
Yep.
Right. And then the last thing here is, we've talked a lot about trace minerals. And so Buoy is a amazing company. And one of the things that I love and why I got connected with them is because they work with individuals who have chronic illness. And they actually have, so we have a coupon code. It's FitMom for 20% off your first order, but they also give 35% off to individuals who struggle with chronic illness. And I actually have some, if you guys are watching on YouTube, because we have a YouTube channel, you should go and watch some of their little, what do you call these things? Squeezies. I call them little squeezies, but it's just a little plastic bottle. You can throw it into your purse, and I will put this into, I've done it with coffee, I've done it with water, I've done it with, adding it to my Element, but it's 87 ionic trace minerals. So we have magnesium, potassium, selenium, boron, but it also has no sugar, no sweetener, no flavor, or no additives. So in the liquid format, it's nice because you can travel with it. It's very absorbable. Research shows that it's actually more likely to hydrate you faster. So 64% increase than just drinking water alone in terms of hydration. And it's third-party tested for microplastics, heavy metals, and impurities. And again, with that chronic illness community, it's a 35% off lifetime discount, which I just think is really cool. For people with POTS, these orthostatic issues they've got. I have had to pull some people off of Element because of the previous formulation. So lemonade doesn't have maltodextrin and neither does the just regular salt. Why would you buy unflavored? Like just get mineral salt. Love you, Element, but let's be honest. But I am loving the lemonade flavor of Element, and that doesn't have maltodextrin. But I had to pull some of my people off of that because they were experiencing more bloating from some of those flavors. And this can happen with other things like, if you're looking at electrolytes, turn it over and don't just look at sodium, potassium, but also look at all the ingredients. Are there natural flavors? Is it sucralose, stevia, monk fruit? Like, it just depends upon what's going on in your gut. If you've got a lot of issues, you might be reacting and getting more bloated from these things. So that's why Becca was mentioning the just ingredients. They're really clean. We like them a lot. My caveat here is that they don't mix super well. Like, you need to froth it into something and it does leave a residue in your cup, but clean your cup, that's fine. And, it does break a fast. So from a fasting standpoint, I would be using Element Tea, I would be using Buoy, or you could just use, like we were saying earlier, trace mineral salt, like that salt Ferk I mentioned. But you want to watch out for any sugars or carbohydrates if you are doing a fasting protocol. And the last thing I'll say about that, if you're doing a fasting protocol and you're not taking electrolytes, you're doing a disservice. What was the big thing that I talked about with histamine? It helps detox. It helps shuttle things in and out of cells. So if you are fasting and you just decide, I'm just gonna not have anything at all, and you're herxing, you're getting fatigue really bad, you're getting headaches, right? You're maybe getting rashes and the kind of outbreaks here. You probably are detoxing at a higher rate than what you're eliminating. So pee, poop, sweat, breathing, those types of things. You would then want to make sure that you get back with your practitioner, talk about it, maybe get a binder in place. Maybe you need to do fast mimicking and go slower walking into a fast. But that is one of the main reasons that we keep the sodium potassium ratio in fasting higher and keep those minerals on board to help you clear things out.
There are caveats. That if you are not getting into ketosis and if your body's really struggling to produce ketones, that is where you actually bring electrolytes out and do less water, because technically dry fasting is the most effective way to get into ketosis, and we rarely use that. We rarely need to use that. And it's usually the second or third time we go into it that we do that someone is, their body is trained to do it. I had to do that because my body, I was doing electrolytes, and my body was not. And then when we pulled down water, switched me to higher potassium during the fast, my ketones came up. So it is very caveat situations, but 1,000% agree. If you are doing this on your own, you will eliminate a lot of symptoms with fasting by keeping electrolytes on board.
All right, with that, y'all, don't forget, links are in the show notes. We are hosting FitMom Live, the Own It Women's Summit, September 5th and 6th in Arlington Heights, just outside of Chicago. Links are in the show notes. You can get $100 off to get your ticket if you are ready to come and be in person with us and some of the top experts. So we've got a whole, landing page with all the stuff, an event packet that our team did an amazing job putting together for you. Check that out. And if you like this episode, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share the show.